would need to go on mute.
Right.
I hear a lot of typing.
Cambridge Investment Group.
So we have a quorum.
He
I'm
also
going
goes
to
under
open up and call to
Kevin
order
Ratzi,
the
Financial
West Haven
Advisor.
Subcommittee of the MARB. It is October 19th, and the time is 10:06. I am Kimberly Kennison. I'm the designee for Kateri McCaw. And with me today is Christine Shaw, and she is the designee for Treasurer Woodin. I'd like to remind everybody to please put your lines on mute because I don't want to have the conflicting background noise, and that will be helpful for all of these members. And as members are aware, Secretary McCaw informed this board on October the 6th at that meeting that OPM would be engaging with an independent auditor to review the city's expenditures of COVID relief funds. Since then, or immediately after, we have contracted and executed a contract with Cone Resnick last week, and they are underway. The city has been notified by Cone that they planned to do a thorough forensic audit of the coronavirus funds. So that is the update that I have regarding that audit, and things are underway. So the next item on the agenda, or the first, is the approval of the minutes of September the 23rd. If I could get a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion.
So moved. I'll second. Okay, Steve. Thank you, Christine. And any discussion? No discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hamilton?
Yes.
Mr. Felsigno?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Kennison?
Yes. Yes.
And Mr. Egan? Okay, that's everybody.
Thank you, Julian. Okay, the minutes have been approved.
You want to turn your speaker up there, Terenzio? Will you use yours?
Next item on the
Sure.
agenda. Fire districts. And part two,
Back connection.
summary of this
Breaking up. Yeah, you
Fire
may turn yours
districts.
off and we'll use the phone.
district, Mike.
But we just turn these down to use the computer.
Provide a little bit of a presentation and a PowerPoint from the recommendations that were written.
Bad network quality. MARB needs to upgrade infrastructure.
From the report that was report out that happened in July, and the secretary at that time had several follow-up items for the district and the fire districts, and as a result from that previous meeting. So what was identified were steps that each district should take to improve the funding status of their pension and their OPEB funds. So you're going to hear an update on that, as well as linking those plans to the district's 3-year financial plan. In addition, developing plans for consolidating the investment services. And lastly, developing reserves for fund balance policies. In addition, the MARB members also mentioned the difference between having a pension investment service manager versus an advisor. And so I would like to add that to the list, and I know that we're going to discuss that. So a full report is provided in your materials, and I'm going to hand this over to Julian first and the team to give you some brief updates. We're not going to go through the whole presentation. Julian?
Yes. All of the members should have an updated handout with slide numbers that I sent out yesterday. In fact, you know what, I'm going to just put it up on the screen if that's okay, just so
I think that will be helpful.
on the same page.
Frank is having trouble getting into this meeting, just so you're aware.
Okay.
He's dropping.
So that the PowerPoint should be visible to everybody within a moment or so. I'll just kind of quickly review what the contents are. So we have several slides showing the status of each of the recommendations from the study. And in previous updates, we've covered some of the recommendations, but not all of them. And we thought for the purposes of being comprehensive, we've included the entire list here so you can see what the status of each is. Then we have a section related to pension funding. There's some general information related to each of the pension plans, and then as Kim mentioned at a prior meeting, the Secretary had asked that the subcommittee be sort of advised or presented on what the plan is for improving the funded status of each of the pension funds. And she also asked that the strategies for improving the funded status of each plan be linked to each of the district's 3-year plans. So we've outlined what the current plan is for pension funding for each district. And since we're also tasked with updating the 3-year plan to reflect those measures, we've also incorporated the impact of the planned purchases of apparatus for each district, because those figures had not previously been included in the 3-year plan. So this was an opportunity to fold both of those items into an updated 3-year financial plan. So we also have a little bit of information on the apparatus purchases, which were explained to the subcommittee at the July meeting. That section is then followed by the actual revised 3-year plans for each district and reflects the handful of changes that I just described. And I mentioned that there is a section in here that provides an update on the recommendations in the study. You'll recall that the study included about 25 recommendations in total. We wanted to tie this update to all of them in the fire study, so we've included,
You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press *6.
And then this is followed by tables that provide a quick snapshot on the status of each of these recommendations. We're not going to go through each of them. This is really information for your reference. But as we were putting the information together, we started making distinctions between some recommendations that are, sort of one and done. That can be simply checked off the list as soon as they're completion of a single task or an accomplishment, such as the creation of the Tri-District Commission, versus other types of recommendations that are more ongoing or in process in nature. They require either many steps or a sustained effort. So, for example, one of the recommendations is to achieve funding of the pension ADEX. Well, that wouldn't be a one and done type deal. That would be obviously a sustained effort over many years. So we've tried to make those distinctions in this update. You'll see that for some that have been marked off as completed, these are largely items that to some extent are prerequisites for advancing other initiatives. We have things like the establishment of the Tri-District Commission, hiring a single actuary for the pension and OPEB plans for each of the districts, and the preparation of the 3-year plans. And then we have a number where there's been considerable progress but are still ongoing. This is in the areas of sharing or merging services among the 3 districts. And, as we talked extensively about, and we'll continue to talk about, the addressing the funding of the pension plans. And that leads us into a section that does begin to look at some of the details about the pension plans and what the districts are planning to do moving forward, and working with the actuary. And Mike Malone is going to pick this up from here. And Michael, as you just give me a heads up when you want me to switch slides.
Okay, now why don't you keep it, Julian? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You are no longer
Can you
muted.
guys hear me now? No? Oh,
Barely.
okay. How about now?
A little better.
Is this better?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm at the eye doctor. Is that better or worse? Sorry, I have a lot of eye problems lately, so I'm just in that mode. Anyway, what we decided to do, Julian and I, and first of all, I want to thank Julian because he took what was pretty much of a mishmash of stuff and made it informative, clear, and pretty concise. This is simply a profile of the three plans so that you have some background as we go forward. And you've probably seen these numbers in various stages, but we thought it would be good to put it all on one piece of paper, one slide. And so you have at the top the interest rate assumptions that the actuarial person, Jen Castellano, was using for evaluations. The one thing I would note is that she did mention to us, and I think we passed it along to MARB, that the interest rate assumption for Allentown is likely going to go down to at least 6.5% when they do the actuarial valuation in July. You see the dates of the last valuations. You see that 2 of the 3 districts have valuations that are, starting now, ongoing. And the Center District is a year from now. And then on the far right, you have the funding ratios for the 3 plans. And that was as of the last valuation, so understand that that's a little bit dated. And then what we did in the next section under pension investment performance is we wanted to at least capture what 3 years of performance look like. And you can see each of the funds there. Allentown, we use that as an example, what the value was in 19, 20, and 21. That's as of the end of the fiscal year, what the investment income was in each of those fiscal years, and what the rate of return was in each of those fiscal years. And so on average, I think Allentown had a little over 9% rate of return for 3 years, West Shore 11.13%, and the Center District about 8.43%, all well above the interest rate assumption. The one thing I did want to mention, though, because we have a bit of an anomaly with West Shore, and because we weren't comfortable with the actual investment return, the dollar amount, you can see we asked for this. They had a fantastic year. The rate of return was 30.56%. What happened is, though, there was a switch in managers early on in the late in the previous fiscal year. And what we discovered when we were about to post what the investment income was that there was apparently a private equity portion of the fund, I don't know, it was $500,000 or $600,000, that hadn't been rolled into these numbers and reflected. And so we did not have the final investment income return to show you, but I can tell you it was in the neighborhood of about $1 million. And once we get that final number worked up, we will send it to you. So that's just an overview, a quick profile of the 3 funds and some of the more critical issues that you would probably want to just know about. Okay, so I'll move on from there. Can you show the next?
Okay, so,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know if you're comfortable taking questions about some of the performance figures here. Specifically, what really jumps out at me is the comparison of rates of return from fiscal 20 to 21. That's an incredible swing for West Shore. But what's also interesting, if you just look at fiscal 21, there's also very significant variation between the performance of Allentown and Center District, which are about the same, and West Shore. So I'm just curious, beyond what you just described as the function of the private equity utilization, that seems to be very significant. Is there a different asset allocation strategy that West Shore has? Because their lows are so significantly low compared to Allentown and Center District, and they're outliers in terms of the returns of the following year.
Yes, and that's a really good observation, and I don't have I don't have one. I don't have a thorough understanding of the pension plans yet. I've worked with the investment managers only briefly, but one of the things that I do want to point out is that both Allentown and Center District have the same investment manager and have the same basic allocation distribution and the same basic philosophy. And West Shore is managed by Raymond James, and that was a transition made about a year ago. So Raymond James is new to this process, at least for 1 year now. And they also manage the police plan, and while they didn't achieve a 30.56% return on the police plan, they also had very significant returns. So I do know that generally they're a little bit less risk averse and a little bit more aggressive. But I can't translate that to you into actual allocation and so on, because I haven't gotten that involved in the plans yet. But I certainly will, and I'll be happy to get it up to Kim and to you as soon as I can put it together. And the other thing is, I think it speaks to why one of the recommendations from the consultant was the idea of looking at possibly having one manager for all three plans. Maybe this works, maybe it doesn't work, but you pointed out a very important distinction, and that is there is certainly a difference in performance from one to the other.
Yes, thank you. And I'd like to just acknowledge that, this subcommittee has spoken about the wisdom of consolidating these pension plans for the better part of a year. And I think it shows incredible progress that there is movement in the direction of consolidation. I think these numbers bear out that there shouldn't be such an outlier for one of the districts, especially when the poorest funded plan, it sounds as if they're taking very risky bets. And that's actually not from our experience in the Treasury. That's, when you have such a funding challenge, you really have to be a little bit more conservative, but without knowing what the underlying options are, I can't comment much further than that. I do, though, would like to explore some of the recommendations around centralizing in just one investment manager. I think there should be a little bit of flexibility, because there may be 2 or 3 managers that can offer the kind of advice on a scale that makes sense for all of the districts. I would hesitate going from one structure where you're all sitting and not taking advantage of economies of scale, and moving in the direction where it's so rigidly vested in just one manager. So I think somewhere in the middle might be an appropriate next step to consider.
And, I'm sorry, I guess I misspoke. I understand that really what the concept is uniformity. And a singular manager is not necessarily the same as having uniformity. And I hear you about the idea of having maybe a couple of managers on each fund so that there's a little diversification and a different philosophy slightly with each manager. And so certainly we will explore all of those. Ultimately, it'll be up to the respective commissions to decide ultimately where they go. But obviously, if the evidence is there to bear it out, hopefully it'll support itself and it'll sell itself. But I appreciate your recommendation. It doesn't necessarily mean that it should be one manager exclusively for all three funds.
This is... I'm sorry,
yes.
So I like
Yes.
what Christine said, but I'll go one step further. This subcommittee, over the last year and a half that I can remember, even maybe further back, we've been talking about this pension forever. And it seems to me that the advice or the suggestion we made is exactly what Christine Shaw mentioned. Numbers are numbers. So somewhere along the line, we need to bring West Shore's numbers up with Allentown and the Center District. And I don't think you should have just one manager. But I think what needs to be done is we need to do some more research, or the group needs to do more research on some of the other bigger and more successful pension plans that the state perhaps has, and maybe piggyback some information from them, and to see what might be in the best interest of all three districts combined. But to have this type of disparity seems to be counterproductive.
Okay. Well, one of the things obviously we'll do is reach out to the treasurer's office for some guidance on this anyway. So that goes without saying.
But I also echo, I really think it's time for West Haven to, put in place best practice, and really best practice here, what needs to be done. We've spoken about it before, and to hear West Shore just changed investment managers about a year ago, we've been talking about this for more than a year, frankly, and I don't think that that's moving toward best practice. Best practice to me means, one, consolidating the funds for investment purposes, so that you have one larger pool of money that you're investing. You can still keep track of your funds for each of the three pension funds, but they ought to be consolidated and invested together, number one. Number two, you ought to have one independent investment advisor that is not paid on the basis of the assets under management, or at least isn't paid on the basis of, which asset, how you invest those assets. And that independent advisor should then advise you on issues like appropriate asset allocation. You may want to have an asset liability study conducted as part of that, and then assist you, that independent investment advisor can assist you in essentially deciding how many investment managers you actually ought to have, and how that ought to be structured. So it seems to me best practice is really well known, it's really well documented. There's plenty of pension plans around Connecticut that are doing exactly this. The Commissioner's Office, so I really need, as it sounds like the other members of the MARB also would like to see West Haven in that direction.
Understood. And, just by way of background, in their defense, they've certainly started to do a lot of things operationally and financially soon, well, actually before the report was issued. And as a result of a lot of things that were going on in the city and other projects, really weren't able to devote attention to working with them until probably just in the last 6 months, and that's when we started to pull a lot of this together. So I realized the importance of this, and it wasn't through anyone's neglect or lack of recognition of the importance. It was just the sheer volume of what we were doing and what point we were able to actually sit down and work collectively and collaboratively.
Thank you, Michael. So I'd just like to offer a closing comment, although I don't think we're quite done with this. I just wanted to underscore that, the State Treasurer's Office, as has been mentioned, does oversee the combined retirement plans and trust funds. And so I just want to, for the benefit of the chiefs who are on the line, there are very distinct, very unique plans that fall within an umbrella. There's the State Employees Retirement Fund, which is separate and apart from the Teachers Retirement Fund, which is separate and apart from the Municipal Employees Retirement Fund. But taken together, we invest those assets in different types of investments, like fixed income or real estate or real assets. So, there are models where we can, in a very cost-effective way, take advantage of the ability to get access to
They don't have a clue, so let it go.
That makes sense, given the funded ratio and the liabilities.
Just let them talk. They don't have a clue, they don't want to have a clue.
Oversight of the pension boards, over the benefits
Don't worry
side
about
of the investment piece, there are undeniable opportunities for
Let it go.
efficiency to maximize your returns.
Thank you. Okay, what we want to do now, I'm sorry, are there any other questions? Okay.
Basically,
We just wanted to quickly get into the funding levels and activities of the three plans. We have West Shore first, and one of the things that they did in their last actuarial evaluation is they moved to a level funding pension contribution method with the help of Jen Castellano, who designed it. They are now meeting their ADEC, and their contribution is, I believe, let's see, I have it here somewhere. Okay.
What's the other saying? Less is more.
Yes. I almost lived by that.
I'm
Sorry.
learning the hard
There
way.
it is.
Okay.
We always get
Their contribution is $2,773,000 annually. So they have a level contribution. It's built into their 3-year plan. And so they've addressed the fact that they have something that they can afford and that is going to address the long-term unfunded liability. And so that's pretty much where they are, and that'll get revisited again in the next couple of months when the evaluation is done. And if there are no questions, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, this is the Center Fire District plan, and what has taken place here is that the chief has been contributing about $500,000 annually on top of his regular contribution to the plan. Fortunately, because of the recent appropriation of about $2.7 million in pilot contributions, the chief is able to take some of that money and use it to make up the shortfall that he's experienced in meeting his ADEC. So in the revised 3-year plan, you'll see on a few more slides, there's about a $2 million addition in each of the next 3 years to his contribution, which will meet the full ADEC. The other thing that Jen Castellano and I have talked about with the chief is the possibility of proceeding with a similar approach to funding this plan that she used with the West Shore plan. She has looked at the possibility of phasing in this contribution, this ADEC, but as long as the chief has this additional money from the state, obviously he can meet that ADEC. And the other option that she's going to look at is similar to what she did with West Shore, and that is develop a level funding mechanism for them so that they don't have the volatility of not knowing from year to year what they're going to have to contribute and how much that contribution might change. So the two possibilities here are either a phase-in, which possibly might not be needed to get them to the ADEC since they're going to be there over the next 3 years with the supplemental funding that they receive, or actually go to a level funding mechanism. So that's pretty much where this stands, and you can see in the table below what that additional funding represents in each of the next 4 years, 21 estimated, 22, 23, and 24. And again, that's coming from the additional $2.7 million in pilot funds that were not budgeted, and rightfully so because they weren't available until after the center district budget was adopted. So they were never figured into the bottom line, but they'll be worked into the revised 3-year plan. Okay? And then,
Michael, before we move on, Michael?
yes.
Kim?
Yes, hi.
Before we move on, one question. I know that they don't have an evaluation until July of '22, and I do recall in 2020 when we did receive that evaluation that it looked at, it could have been advantageous for them to take on the similar model as West Shore. Is the chief looking to get that evaluation with that option of the other model of the flat
funding similar to West Shore prior to the 22 evaluation?
We hadn't talked about it. Again, it's his call, and it's something I'm sure that Jen could advance, but it hasn't been discussed. And I guess part of that was simply because since we were able to achieve paying the ADEC for the next 3 years, it didn't rise to the top, but I'll leave it to the chief to decide whether he wants to explore that now or not.
Should I comment?
Yeah.
Hi, Kim. I didn't have a specific conversation, but I certainly think within the commissioner we have.
I think you and I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the table. It's got to be up to the commissioners to decide, but I would expect if we can do it in the 2022 assessment or evaluation, that we would take that advantage and do that.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll work with the chief to talk to Jen and see if that's a possibility. I know that she's trying to get the other 2 evaluations done, but she might be able to do at least an analysis that'll give us a sense of where it might end up a year from now.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide, which is the Allentown Fire District. And I don't need to go through this, I don't think, in too much detail. If you recall, about 5 months ago, when the city was adopting its budget, one of the key concerns that MARB conveyed was the status of the Allentown Fire District pension plan. And at that time, Frank and Julian and I put together some information that we received from the actuary. And currently, the Allentown Fire Department is meeting their pension ADEC, and they are contributing $350,000 in addition to meeting the ADEC as a supplemental contribution, and that's reflected in their 5-year plan. I'm sorry, they did a 5-year, the other 2 departments did 3. Anyway, if you remember, Jen Castellano did a preliminary review of the plan and determined that 2 assumptions would change. The interest earnings, which are 6.75, would drop to 6.5%, but correspondingly, the amortization of the plan would go from 12 years to 15 years. The analysis showed that the collective combined cost of all of that would be actually a $200,000 reduction in all likelihood in their ADEC. So we're waiting obviously for the final analysis and evaluation report, but if all stays as is, the district will be contributing $350,000 over the current ADEC for the next at least 3 more years. And in addition to that, the savings, which could be another $200,000 a year, would also be going into the plan. So in effect, if the numbers fall the way she estimates they will, that plan will be funded and receiving a supplemental contribution of $550,000 per year. Now, she's not going to be able to reflect those future contributions in the valuation because she can't do that until the contributions are actually made, but she'll incorporate language to that effect in the valuation when it's completed. Okay? And so if there aren't any questions, we'll go on to the next slide.
Actually, I do have a question.
Yes.
As part of the 3-year plan and the analysis that's been done, have there been projections of the when the plan will hit a 50% funded ratio, or a chart that kind of summarizes the growth in the funded status through the end of the amortization period?
I don't know. I don't think so, Christine.
Okay.
I've looked through the valuations. I don't remember seeing that. That could be in there, but if it's something that you would like us to get, then I'll talk to the actuary and ask her to develop it. Would that
So it's, yes, and it is a fairly standard,
Okay.
set of, numbers that are prepared, assuming that at the end of the 15-year amortization period, the plan will be fully funded, right?
be? Yes.
Right, so at some point, to discussion, folks within the city, as well as this subcommittee, but a healthy pension plan doesn't necessarily have to be 100%.
Yeah.
Certainly something better than the funded ratios we see now, but it is sometimes helpful to get a sense of the timing, and I imagine it'll hit probably 75%, maybe in about 3/4 into this amortization.
Okay. Well, I will follow up accordingly. Also, I'll take a look while I'm offline and somebody else is presenting to see if we have it in the existing valuations. It might be there and I'm just not aware of it, but I will check first, and if we don't, we'll get it for you.
2026. What we have is in the most recent valuation, the long-term forecast that has been checked out with the projected funded ratio along with the projected ADEX. What we do not have is an estimate of how these other variables will affect the funded ratio. So the changes in the assumptions regarding rate of return and the amortization period, and then the additional contributions. We don't have forecasted funded ratios that take those variables into account. But there's a table while you're looking, Michael, it's a long-term projection about halfway through the page 64.
Yeah, Frank just told me that it looked like from the current valuation, it would happen in about 2026.
For Allentown.
For Allentown. I don't have the other two yet.
And it would get full funding in 33.
Full funding in 33. But I'll make sure I get it together and get it to you, Christine.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then this is a slide that I think Julian's going to walk you through.
Yes, since we had the moving parts of the pension fund to incorporate into the 3-year plan, it was an opportunity to fold in the potential impact for the apparatus plan as well. And the details of the purchases are still in flux, so this is not a final purchase costs, loan periods, loan terms are still to be determined. So we made some assumptions. We're able to, build in at least some placeholders for potential debt service. So in each case, you can see the purchases that were outlined in the last presentation. Each district has kind of a different blend of funding sources between grants, use of fund balance, or assigned fund balance in some cases. West Shore has a piece of their purchases built into their operating budgets. All of those, again, those are placeholders for the time being, but all of those were used to back into an amount that would need to be borrowed in each instance, and then that was used to roll into the revised three-year plans so that we could get a complete picture. To that first slide, so the first example is West Shore, and Michael will walk us through this, but I just wanted to point out the row here. So we took the revenues from the 3-year plan, of course, and then added to that the unanticipated and unbudgeted pilot that became available after each of the districts adopted their budget. So this is funding that's above and beyond what they had originally planned. And these are figures straight out of the adopted state budget. The case can be made that the forecast for 2024, which is beyond the current biennium, is a bit speculative. However, the changes that were made to the pilot payments were changes to the formula and the rules that apply to grant. And the grant is now applied to fire districts as well as general government. So while the overall funding may change from year to year, it may moderate. It's less likely or more of a hurdle less likely that certain recipients, such as fire districts, would be stripped from grant eligibility. And as far as funding levels go, the practice that we've had with each of our designated municipalities is to assume flat funding from the state in each of the 5-year plans that have been approved by the board. So for projection purposes, this approach is consistent with the other 5-year plans we've looked at. If it looks like things, the numbers may moderate significantly in the future, we do have a little bit of runway here with the second year of the biennium, but I know that there was some question about whether to include the pilot going forward into 2024, and I think it's proper to include it, and that the amounts, of course, will be subject to changes as future budgets are adopted.
Increase,
Michael will walk through each of the 3-year plans as impacted by the changes that we described earlier.
Thank you, Julian. This is, I think, pretty clear, but let me just go back over it. When we developed these revised 3-year plans, we took the 3-year plans as they exist now, okay? And the only things that have changed, if you go down the page, is the addition of the unanticipated, unbudgeted pilot under the revenues, okay? Because if you recall, I mentioned earlier that when the district's budgets were adopted, this pilot plan, which is new, had not been approved yet by the legislature. So these were not in the revenue figures, the 3-year plans of any of the districts. Allentown had some money in there, but not the full amount because there was a supplement to what was appropriated. The other change that you might see is in the pension contributions. With West Shore, there wasn't any. As you know, they have the level funding. With the Allentown district, there wasn't any. You will see a change when we get to the center district, because as I mentioned earlier, they're utilizing money from the pilot payment to meet their ADEC. The other place where you're going to see a change is under estimated debt service. Because if you recall, when we last talked, the fire chiefs laid out what their acquisition plan was for apparatus. But at that moment in time, we hadn't done anything to determine what the borrowing costs would be, nor had those borrowing costs been built into the 3-year plan. So the other addition here, besides the pilot, is the estimated debt service on the apparatus. And as you can see, there's no debt service paid until the 2nd and 3rd year. So what Julian did was he took that outline that was on the previous slide of what was being acquired. We got the estimated amounts from the chiefs. There was an amount of money that each of the departments is contributing, whether it's from a grant, whether it's from fund balance, or some money that had been set aside previously. And we netted out what the actual borrowing gross cost would be, and then Julian amortized that over 5 years at, I think, 5%. And then the only other new item that you'll see on these slides is this slide here that says utilization of fund balance or cash as a portion of the payment towards the apparatus. So you can see that the West Shore District in this scenario is using about $970,000. Accumulated contributions toward this and their fund balance to offset the cost, which is somewhere around $1.9 million. And then with all of that falling to the bottom, you can see that when Julian did this analysis, it looks like at the end of '22, all things considered, they'll have a fund balance of about $2.2 million, which hopefully will grow as this progression shows to about $3.5 million over the course of 3 years. The last thing you want to know is that at the bottom, Julian identified what the estimated surplus is in the past fiscal year. So West Shore was estimating a $650,000 budget surplus in the last fiscal year, which was then factored into these numbers to get the estimates going forward. So that's the model that we developed and that Julian analyzed and constructed. And then if we go to the next one, I won't take as much time. I'll just again highlight what the changes are in terms of the items. This is the center district, and again, the new items are the unanticipated, unbudgeted pilot of $2.5 million. That's something that was not in their previous budget, as I said, and so we included it over all 3 years. The other thing that is new is the contribution to the pension plan of $5,888,22 and $5,706 and $5,877. In the previous 3-year plan, the chief was budgeting what he had been budgeting for the last few years, but with an increment, and then another $500,000 on top of it. Unfortunately, that fell about $2,008,000 short, and that was made up by virtue of this additional money that you received from the state, okay? So these numbers that you see for pension contribution meet the ADEC. If you go back and look at the earlier 3-year plan, they're about $2 million lower. They will not meet the ADEC. The estimated debt service, again, is nothing more than Julian taking the 2 purchases of fire equipment. I think it was a ladder truck and a pumping engine that totaled about $2 million, factoring out the amount of money that the chief's going to contribute from a grant, and netting that out, I think it came to about $1.5 million, and then he amortized that over 5 years at 5%. So that's a new addition into the 3-year plan, which is the debt service payment on the acquisition of those 2 pieces of apparatus. You see what the surpluses are estimated to be in each of those years. And then the other new item down here is this utilization of fund balance, additional contribution. That's the $2,008,000 that the chief is using from the $2.5 million that he got in the pilot payment to make up the shortfall in the pension contribution. You don't see that in the other 2 years because it's already blended in, but it hadn't been blended in here, and so that's why it stands out. The other thing you want to note is that at the bottom of the page it says that this does assume a slight deficit of $50,000 in fiscal 21. So when Julian started this exercise, he reduced that from what was the existing fund balance to come up with these totals, these new totals at the bottom, which are projected to go from just over $2 million to $3.2 million over the course of the 3 years. So it gives you a pretty good sense of what the impact of all of these new elements are, and excuse me, what the overall fund balance and surpluses are projected to be. And then if we go to the last slide in this group, it's similar to this, only it's the Allentown slide. And again, the new additions are the unanticipated pilot. There's no change in the pension contributions because they were already exceeding their ADEC. Estimated debt service, again, similar to the analysis that Julian did with the other 2 departments. And then the other thing is the utilization of fund balance. Actually, I'm sorry, there is none in this scenario because most of this is actually, all of this is being paid, I think, from grants and other sources within the operating budget. So what you see here, and also if you look at the bottom of the page, it says that Allentown is assuming about a $916,000 surplus. So Julian factored that into this analysis in 22, and you could see that it looks like the end of 22, if all things stay as predicted here, their fund balance is going to be about $3.6 million or 42%. and can grow to as high as $5,144,000. The one thing I did want to mention is that, unlike the other two districts, Allentown has received a pilot payment in a number of the last few years. The difference, though, is that this pilot payment is going from about $950,000 to somewhere about $1.6 million. And so this $770,000 is the difference. It's the supplement. It's the additional amount of money that they're going to receive in the pilot, which they have been receiving and they have been budgeting. So that, I think, pretty much captures the critical parts of their budgets that have been changed and impacted by the work we've done and outlined in the previous slides. And most importantly, I think it's captured what we wanted, and I think what Marb wanted, which was to get a sense of what the continuing fund balances might look like as we go out into the future. And you can see that they're healthy, and if all of this falls into place, they're hopefully likely to grow slightly over the next couple of years as well. So I think that completes the slides. And then on page 19, we tried to put together just some bullets of what we know as of now are our priorities moving forward, and that's Julian and me and Frank and the districts and so on. And I know I'm not going to go through all of these, but I have a laundry list here of the things that you recommended relative to opportunities that we should pursue with pension plans. So I won't reiterate them. I got them all. I am familiar with most of what everyone talked about. And so obviously we'll bring that to the chiefs. And, again, not to be a dark cloud, but I do want to underscore the fact that they're not part of the city. Allentown is the Center District and West Shore answer to fire commissions. Of course, Allentown does as well. And so our success in moving some of these things along is going to also depend on their willingness and support in embracing these changes, and the rationale for them is obviously going to be important in the hopes that they see this as a best practice that is certainly worth pursuing. OPEB considerations, we really haven't been able to take much time yet to address that. All three departments do have OPEB funds, but what I learned from our actuary is that they have not been established as trust funds formally yet. So that's in the works, and then once that's done, we will have numbers from our actuary relative to the unfunded liability and recommendations for contribution levels to address the unfunded liability. The districts are making contributions separately to supplement the OPEB liability, but until we have evaluation, we don't know whether or not they're in line with what we should be contributing relative to making them actuarially sound. And then with the fund balance, this was a recommendation of the MARB. Obviously, we're all happy that the fund balance is strong, and hopefully it'll grow slightly over the next 3 years for each of the departments. But what was recommended to us, which we are working on, is to actually develop a formal fund balance policy, so there's something in place to guide future chiefs and future district commissioners from the district commissions to preserve and enhance that fund balance. So those are the three major things that we have marked as our priorities moving forward, and I know there's a whole host of sub-level priorities, but those were the three major ones that Julian and Frank and I and the chiefs collectively discussed, and Julian and I decided to at least address these or identify these. So I think that concludes what we wanted to say. If you have any questions, certainly I'll be happy to answer them.
No, thank you. I do think as we start to move forward and we start to get the new evaluations, it would be helpful for us to project out as we receive those actuarial reports and where they think that our contributions are and the funding amount, that folds into the plan as well. And that we can also see a difference in that we're funding more, or what that philosophy is, like West Haven, West Shores is a little bit different philosophy with that flat budgeting. I think that would be helpful as well. So thank you for the update. Thank you, chiefs. And I do, we've made progress. That there's a lot more still to be done. Really starting seriously and to make sure that you're heard in the future. This all of your firefighters. Yes, Stephen.
Is there any, are these replacing items or are these additional items that they're buying? Are these replacing old equipment?
Yes.
Yeah, old equipment.
So what are they doing with the old equipment? Is it up for sale? Are they going to offset cost by selling some? Or is it going to be continuing addition to?
Steve, I think rather than have all the three chiefs tell you the same thing, I think I can answer that because they informed me of what their plans are. Their plans are to sell the used equipment, and at this moment in time, because there's no realistic way to value those pieces, we did not work them in to the funding of the future apparatus. But in all likelihood, if they do receive a substantial amount of money for that equipment, I would expect that some of that money, if not all of it, would go towards the acquisition price. But it's too early to determine. But tell me if I'm speaking out of turn. But if I remember, each of you said that you would sell the surplus equipment, right? Are you keeping any of it?
Well, we may be keeping an engine as for reserve.
As reserve.
Because we have no spare, NSPA wants you having spare, so we may keep, I think the ladders will move, but the engines we may keep one.
Did you hear that, Steve? That was.
Don't forget that it takes 15 to 18 months to acquire.
If I'm not mistaken, he said some might be held as replacement.
Spares.
What he's thinking, what he's going to do is his pumper he's going to hold because he doesn't have a spare, but the truck he's going to sell, the ladder truck. And otherwise, I think the other chiefs are going to sell their surplus equipment. But the other point I wanted to underscore, which Chief Scaffarella mentioned to me, is the long lead time in getting this equipment, in the firehouse. It's anywhere from a year to 18 months from the time you place the order. And
I'd like to add to that.
yeah, and so, this doesn't happen quickly. And also, I know that Chief Terenzio from Allentown wants to add to that. Go ahead, Chief.
Yes, as a segue to that, Chief O'Brien and I were at a career chiefs meeting about a month ago, and as this supply issue that goes on throughout the country now, we're being told, and in Chief O'Brien's particular case, when he goes to replace his ladder truck, after any orders received after next year, depending on the company that you go with, you're looking at maybe 2.5 to 3 years of actually getting that aerial into operation. So it's, right now, things are getting longer, but after next year, all the manufacturers, and I've been in contact with a number of them, are all saying the same thing, that the supply chain for the parts and to get the vehicles actually constructed, especially with an aerial, as you all well know, is a very complex, big vehicle. They're looking at 2025 to get it actually into operation. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all we had on this matter.
All right, any other questions for the fire chief before we move on to the next agenda item? Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye. So the next item is to review and to discuss the 2021 MOA open items.
You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press star.
Does the mayor need support?
Mike, I have to put you on mute.
You are no longer muted. You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press star 6.
We keep losing Frank.
The phone over here gets muted and unmuted on its own.
I just muted one, but it's showing me that Mike Malone is talking, not
Michael, you need to turn off your phone.
I'm sorry.
Mike, you're always getting in trouble, Mike.
muting him, and he comes back.
I'm sorry.
Look at that penny.
I have a constant.
No, I never said that, so thank you, Frank. A memo is included from Frank in our packet about the new training, so he's going to give us an update on the status of that open MOU item. We're really focusing on those items that are still, that are being worked on.
So, thank you, Kim. So, a letter was sent by me to the MARB. Basically, Tyler Tech is no longer conducting on-site training because of the pandemic. They had hoped to begin this month, but they have delayed it again. So I have a call actually with them tomorrow. It's a 4-hour discussion. They are going to present to me the entire life cycle from purchase requisition to accounts payable, actually paying the vendor. I want them to show me, as if we had never seen the system before, exactly what the best practices in Munis are, what the system can do, what it can't do. I will then, with the assistance of Michael Malone and someone who's helping us with the purchasing department, we will put together the appropriate process, and then we can start doing the training with everybody internally. But I did not want to start conducting training and then have Tyler Tech come back and say, why the heck are you doing it this way? There's an easier way, there's a better way, there's more controls around it. So that's where we're headed. They will be here tomorrow. They're coming in from noon till 4:30 via a Zoom meeting. And so I have a number of questions I've written down for them already. So I expect by the end of tomorrow, we should have a better understanding of where we need to go. As I mentioned, purchasing, we do have a consultant here that's helping us with the entire bid versus RFP versus RFQ process. And she is going to be working with Corporation Counsel's office to standardize contracts related to specific bids and specific project types. So that should also streamline the process there. And Michael wanted to add something as well. You can do it from the phone here, Mike?
I can do it. I think, can you still hear me? No?
No, we can't hear you. You're on mute again.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Yep, am I okay, or are you getting feedback?
My wife's getting feedback.
Okay, but I'm okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, just to supplement a couple of the things that Frank said. One of the things that we're doing also in concert with the Munis training is developing purchasing manuals. We developed one that walks the staff through the process for getting a document from the moment you place an order and develop a purchase requisition. It takes them through all of the system and basically explains at what point a check gets issued, who reviews, when it gets kicked back, and so on. Basically, we had a flow chart that was designed by Bloom Shapiro, and what we did was we took it and basically converted it into a narrative step-by-step. Munis has a really good training module, but the problem is it's too technical. And so we wanted to have something just basic enough so that a person understands the steps that they have to follow and what happens in the process after the document leaves their hands. The second procedures manual that we're developing is, so that's developed and it's in a draft. The second one is basically providing the employees with a best practice manual for purchasing procedures. Pulling together information that's in the city ordinance that they're probably not aware of, but also giving them guidelines that are outlined by our procurement manager relative to how to be efficient, when to get 3 solicitations, how to go about it, and bundled purchasing and those kinds of things, so that it's kind of like a primer on basic purchasing. Just so that we have both of those to support this whole process, because some of the people are new and don't have any real understanding of the whole purchasing responsibility and process. So what we will then do is, as Frank said, based on what we learn from Munis tomorrow, we will revise and refine these documents, one that's written, one that's still in draft, to make sure that they comport with everything that we've learned from Munis and are not, inconsistent or incompatible. So that's happening concurrently while we're going to go through the training ourselves and then hopefully take it to another level, but I'll let Frank explain that. Thank you.
That's good news. I know that you originally had that on in November, so I think you're accelerating that, and I'm glad to hear that news.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where we are as far as, the training goes. There was one other item within the MOA that I had. Those are the open audit issues. From the 2019 audit, the only thing that's open at this point is the recommendation for the consolidation of the pension plans. I spoke to Attorney Tiernan this morning. We do have the individual who is taking care of the police pension, has responded. Lee had said that he put an RFP out there. He was the respondent. He is taking over. He expects the 457 plan as well. We do need to contact Allentown's Fire Commission, because we cannot dictate to them what their pension managers will be. So Lee is reaching out to them. He has told me that he expects to have an answer before the next subcommittee meeting. So that takes care of that item. There was an open item for bid documentation. We have hired a full-time administrative person in finance. She started a couple of weeks ago. Has been fantastic, and pretty much every day she allocates some time. She's been working with the bid documents. So we are getting all of that process around documentation and around paperwork. All of that is being tightened up, and she has been a real boon to the department. In fiscal 20, the audit issue found there was a non-material finding around purchasing regarding shipping receipts and vendors. Those items are being taken care of through the discussions that we'll be having tomorrow and that Michael and I have talked about with the process, so that should all be taken care of. The only other item was the Allentown Fire Department. You'll recall that during the audit, one individual was determined to be paid more than he should have been. That was taken care of. Milliman has not found any other issues. We had them go through and take a look. There were no other issues. And we have corrected that pension amount for that particular pensioner on a monthly basis. He is no longer being overpaid. I have not heard from Corporation Counsel whether or not there is any ability to get what was overpaid to him over the couple of years. But that is where we stand. Those were the only items that I had open as far as audit findings, Ms. Kennison.
Couple other items. I heard you talk about pension, and I do want to talk about staffing, but that's going to be the next item. I know that Julian has worked with yourself and your IT person on the Bloom recommendation that they had provided for IT, and I know that there's some work that has been done and you're making progress. I would recommend that this year because I think that's 2 years old, we did not have that done last year. I think it was the year before, if you were to ask me. I think it would be appropriate at this time to ask CLA to come back and do a look again on the IT side of it, because there's so much going on in the IT world with cybersecurity, and I think it would serve the town well if you got an updated report in that area when the auditors come. It may cost you a little more, but I think it will be worth your while.
I think that's a great idea. They are here today. I see them in one of the conference rooms. They're starting the Board of Ed audit, so I'll go in there and mention that to them.
Yeah, they'll have to add it and put the scope of work in, but I think it will help you to know that if you have areas of weakness or areas that you need no policy that you would want to continue to enhance, and it's been 2 years.
No, I agree. And Jermaine has put together, and we reviewed it with Julian, all of the hardware updates that are coming. They are in the capital plans. So the city is taking that very seriously, and Jermaine is taking that very seriously.
So one of the other items, the secretary had requested in a memo to the mayor, and it was about the open items for the memorandum of understanding and the compliance part of it, and there was an opportunity for you to send a revision and a reset, and I'm just wondering when, we have not seen that yet, and I'm wondering when the secretary could anticipate receiving that.
You can hear me, right? Kim?
Yes,
okay.
yes, I can there.
Within the next couple of days, I will do my best to get that. We have been working on the staffing issues, which are next, and I'm ready to report on that when we get to that topic.
Perfect. So I will inform her. And that's it that I have for open items until I do want to talk about the staffing situation, if you would, please.
Okay, I'll give you an overview of what I have and then entertain any questions. First off, the personnel director has been hired. She is on site. Her first day was yesterday. She is getting right to work and working on the different items, especially going over the HR report that was done, I want to say a couple of years ago now. It's been a while, I know that, to rectify any of those open items. We also, as Frank had said, hired a full-time finance administrative assistant who has assisted Frank already in the office and will continue to, in light of now that we have Cohen Resnick requesting information, so we'll have additional staffing there. We've also hired a floater administrative assistant to help wherever needed throughout the city. But at least this way we have a backup in case anyone gets sick or a vacation or whatever. We have at least for the first time since I've been here, at least administrative staff to take care of it. We also have 3 employees out or going to be out shortly on paid administrative leave. So we are covering those 3 positions, and One is the city council administrative assistant. We are using currently another union employee, 681 worker, that will be able to do this on overtime to get the necessary work completed so the council can facilitate business as they are supposed to. We also have purchasing agent is out on paid administrative leave as well. And as was talked about earlier, we've been using a consultant, and we've increased now the hours for this consulting so that the purchasing department will have adequate, supervision and going forward with whether it be RFPs or any purchasing stuff to get done, because we didn't want to drop the ball there. We have a lot going on. We just got an RFP back for a development project on the shore, so I think that that's extremely important. We also have a CDA employee that is on paid leave as well. Now that's interesting because that doesn't come out of the city budget, so the director will be deciding how, the director of CDA, how that will go forward, whether they're not going to replace the person temporarily until this is all worked out. We do have those 3 positions. And the AP analyst, Frank, was that posted? Because it was supposed to be. No, it's still not posted. It was supposed to be posted. And so I will find out where that is at this point in time, but we are eagerly waiting for that to be posted because, again, that is another critical position that needs to be filled.
I agree.
Yeah, the new personnel director is my next stop immediately following this meeting, Kim.
Yes.
Because I also have a tax manager who has told us a couple of months ago that she is leaving before the end of the calendar year. And that information was forwarded on, and that has not been posted either. So both of those, I'm going to have a conversation with the new personnel director to find out what the heck's going on.
Okay. Yeah, because the more you step down, Frank, you're not going to be able to attend to audits, and you don't want to be jeopardizing that, and because of vacancies.
No, I mean, I'm spending part of my days doing operations work that should be done by others.
Yeah, and you will not be in a position to be able to catch things when you're into the trenches. So it's critical that the vacancies get filled and you have the great staff that you need on board.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
And again, Frank, you should not settle for less. You need that high-level AP person. So, Mayor, I think you agree. You know that that's what's needed in that position. So we've already talked about that at prior meetings. And I know we were anticipating that position will be filled by November 1st. So that needs to get fast-tracked.
Agreed.
Is Beth Sabo still involved, and is she helping with the transition of the HR director's position?
Yeah, she is still involved. Most of her time will now be to supervise the other 4 departments on, they call it human resource side, but we call it like community service side, one of which is the health department, which will be starting vaccinations again, and we have a lot of work to do ahead because the pandemic is still not completely done with us. So, yeah, she has been very helpful, and yes, she is assisting with that.
Okay. Any questions on staffing from the members? All right, can we get a preliminary update on the budget results that you have, Frank?
Sure. So I provided Julian a look at where the 3 major funds are landing. You'll see a column for what's actually in the ledger as of right now, including what's been encumbered, and then there's a column labeled outstanding. The outstanding items, there are none that I know of in Allentown or the sewer, but things such as you'll see an additional $200,000 in revenue for other financial sources. That is an estimate related to the police extra duty. Once that fund gets reconciled and completed, the city does receive a portion of that, of those fees, and that represents that. You'll see in finance, $157,000 reduction in cost What we found was that the fiscal '22 munis administrative fees were booked to the wrong year. So they were booked against June. That has been caught, so that cost will be taken out of the fiscal '21. Public service, that is just a movement between the healthcare that's booked in the city. That represents the portion of the healthcare related to the dispatch, ERS. Because ERS costs are shared between the three departments, we try to keep their costs within that department. So that's just a transfer between employee benefits and ERS. The reason employee benefits is not a negative, to reflect that is I have a placeholder in there. We still have not seen the final IBNR numbers. We have requested them. Something did come in yesterday, I saw, but the analysis that was provided to us was showing the city IBNR was more than the Board of Education IBNR, which made no sense to me since the city moved to the state plan 2 years ago. So the only IBNR that should be coming through from the city side would be primarily retirees, and there's no way that those retirees are exceeding a 1,500 person Board of Education employees. So we pushed back on that.
I thought, okay, did you get any response about that?
The only response I got was, we'll look into it.
Okay, I know that Matt let us know that he wasn't able to join us today. So I do have a question in that area, because I recall that we kept flat budgeting for the Board of Ed for FY22 to cover the IBNR. So rather than taking savings when they went to the partnership plan, we kept the level of funding higher in that budget line to be able to cover the IBNR. I clearly remember that. I made the recommendation to the superintendent. So would you please follow up on that and have somebody send me something in writing about that?
I absolutely will, because as of right now, with my analysis, I have you'll see the outstanding item in the Board of Ed line of almost $900,000. That number is a plug to get from what's currently in Munis to what Matt has told us he would come in at only $145,000 less than budget. So that $898,000 is a plug to get us to that 145. He has indicated that he expects that to be monies for IBNR, but yes, I recall now that we did allow them to flat fund that to cover any IBNR costs. So I will follow up with Matt.
Yep, it was definitely, I know it was my recommendation to them, so that I don't see we need to double talk.
Right.
Kim, if I could add one thing, separate and apart from...
Yeah, turn off your keys on here.
Okay. Wait a minute. Okay. Kim, separate and apart from what Frank's trying to reconcile, I have met with Matt, and he hadn't closed out September yet, and asked me if we could wait a few weeks to meet again. But I wanted to go back and reconcile all of the analysis that I did with them a year ago when they were moving to the state partnership plan, just to see how close the numbers were to what we had estimated, and what in fact was going to happen with the IBNR. So between the two of us, hopefully we'll have an answer, because it's been long in coming.
Okay, thank you. That will be helpful, Mike.
Now, the one other thing that I will point out here, Kim, is that in the...
Yeah, I'm going to, sorry.
In the contingency line, I have an outstanding number of $1 million. What that is made up of is the $616,000 that we had in the budget for a fund balance increase. And the reason I'm including that is I'm going under the assumption that whatever restructuring funds come to the city would not be more than just to keep the city without going into a deficit. So since that line item was part of the original tax base, I included that number. And I have $500,000 just sitting there as kind of a catch-all since we haven't finished closing the year yet. Once we get closer, we can certainly release that $500,000, but I wanted to keep something in place, and I wanted to make sure I spiked it out so that there was some visibility there.
No problem. Because you don't know what the auditors could find.
Exactly, we don't know. So with all of that being said, we're expecting the city to land at a deficit without the restructuring funds of about 1.8. Assuming all 4 million of the restructuring, it would come in at $2 million surplus compared to the 1.3 that we had communicated a month or so ago. So as we refine this, Allentown, you'll see that's the 916,000 that Michael mentioned earlier in his analysis. So we're expecting a surplus there, and WPCA looks like it's coming in at about 1.3 million surplus.
Very good.
So that's where we are, at least financially, for fiscal '21 so far.
All right, thank you, Frank, that's helpful. As far as other business, unless anybody has any questions about the update on the financials, I'm going to move on to other business. Do you have any update on the special district, the special taxing district, Mayor?
The special taxation district is in place, if you will, but we're working on still the interlocal agreement. Corporation Council sent them a draft of both the interlocal agreement and also the bylaws for the district, I want to say about 10 days ago. So he unfortunately is not on this meeting, but I can check with him to see if he's gotten any updates from the developer.
Okay. And ARPA plan, have you done anything as far as building a plan with that as of yet?
What we've done is we've sent out a questionnaire to the public that, and in fact it closes on October the 22nd. We're getting back some replies. And then we are going to, we have like sketched out, I have some, different projects that we would like to do. And then once I see that back, we're gonna work together, be like 3 or 4 of us, we'll put together a plan. Then we plan on having at least 2 public hearings, like open, not just like over with a questionnaire. And if we need another one, we can do that as well. Then we'll put our plan together and then we will forward it to the city council for their due diligence and action on that plan.
Now, one thing I did, Kim, was I did find a very nice document from CCM that was produced for the municipalities in a way to help them generate thought ideas around what the money could be or should be used for. So that was forwarded to the entire city council so that they could start thinking about using the CCM guidance as to how to spend the money. I've also given them, I was able to find Fairfield's final proposal to their finance committee. I forwarded their projects on, as well as Westport's. Those were the only towns I've been able to find that actually had things on their website that listed the projects. But it gives at least the council an idea of how other towns are using this money for not only development, but also small business aid, municipal support, etc. So just something to give them extra ideas.
Thank you, Frank, that's good. Glad to see that you're making some movement in that area. All right. That is the last item that I have, unless anybody from the city or from the board has a question or further discussion under other. I hear nothing. So, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Stephen. Second?
Second.
Tom Hamilton, thank you. All in favor? Let's hear us. Aye. Aye. All right, we have adjourned. Thank you all,
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, when you shut that, the recording.